thank you so much. You know, everything about this idea I like, literally everything about it. I don't say that about most ideas, but I don't see a single thing wrong with this if you can pull it off. And it looks like you've got a good head start with lots of good backers. So we'll be watching this carefully, and check back in with me if you have any exciting updates. If you get a city that bites, I'm all over that. I want to hear more about that. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Patri, can you hear me? Can you tell me how to correctly pronounce your name?
Patri.
Patri Friedman, right?
Yep.
Now, it has to be said right off the bat, and you're probably sick of this, but you have a famous grandfather, don't you?
It's true.
Tell us who your grandfather is.
My grandfather was Milton Friedman, who won the Nobel Prize in Economics.
Not only did Milton Friedman win the Nobel Prize in Economics, but he is one of my greatest heroes. And I didn't know until I was studying up on you before this Periscope. I did not know of that connection. So I'm honored to have you on. I'm a big fan of your grandfather. But what you're doing is even more interesting. Tell us what you were involved in with Pronomos Capital, if I'm saying that right.
Yeah, so Pronomos Capital is the first venture capital fund working to build charter cities, which are cities that have the permission of a government to bring in different laws and establish a region that has different laws and different courts than the rest of the country.
Give me an example of some of the countries you're thinking about for putting your little country within a country.
So the country that has the most advanced program is Honduras, which is kind of random, but the leaders just decided to create this program. They changed the constitution, but they haven't actually authorized any of these yet. We're also talking to countries like the Marshall Islands, a number of the small countries in Europe, some other places in the South Pacific.
Now, give us the really high-level picture. Why anybody even wants to do this? What's the objective? What problem do you solve?
So it's really hard to reform a country by changing the entire legal system at once. Countries that have bad laws or corrupt courts or just want to try out new institutions, there's not really a way to do that. I mean, I come from Silicon Valley, so I think of the issue as being that there's no way to do government startups. And so the whole idea of these cities is, what if we took empty land, and that empty land is very important, and we set up a city that had different laws to try them out and to let people move in kind of steadily over the years and grow a new city. And this is, when I started working on this stuff 20 years ago, it was more hypothetical, but we now have the example of China, which is, with Hong Kong. China copied Hong Kong and all of these little special economic zones like Shenzhen. Eventually they built like 1,500 special economic zones and over decades transformed the entire country from communism to something closer than capitalism using these little one-at-a-time changes.
Now, I've often said that for a lot of countries, they need what I called a government in a box. Now, my idea for it was not as good as your idea, but it was that maybe somebody like a Swiss consultants in Switzerland would just come in and say, okay, for 1 year, we'll be your government. And then when we're done, we'll all leave because we don't have an army. We couldn't stay if we wanted to. And they just fix the government. And I always thought that. But your model seems more sustainable because you'd come in and prove it within the country and you'd make it something that people would want to be part of because it works better, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, you know how consultants are, right? So consultants can come into a company and they look, and whatever they do, that doesn't mean that it's going to stick. It's right. Got to be the people who are running the country for the long term who learn, and you have to be building new institutions and making jobs. Now, there's a part of the country in a box that I'm a big fan of, which is the idea that if we can set up a successful a zone in one country and then a second and then a third and then 10 of them, we can build a set of best practice laws and software for running a city and architectural practices and kind of like have a full stack solution so that it becomes really easy, so that we have a government in a box and any country that we go to says, hey, take these 100 acres and just deploy it. But we have to succeed at doing this, the first time and the first 10 times before we can make it repeatable.
So, what I love about talking with you, which is immediately apparent. So you have obviously some background in both economics and technology development. And when you talk, your language just hits me so perfectly because you've got the two most important things covered. I'm loving where you're going with this. Some specific questions. One of the reasons that these little cities within a city, or a city's kind of country within a country, would work is that each of them would not need their own military because the larger country presumably would protect them. But doesn't that give them do they get any special anything that the rest of the population would resent? Would these little countries within a country require the rest of the country to chip in any taxes or do anything on their behalf? How does that work?
Well, it's more the opposite where, in the Honduran program, the countries are providing jobs. So part of the Constitution is that any businesses in these zones have to employ at least 90% Hondurans. But then there's no there's no taxes flowing either direction. So the zone operator gets, if they charge taxes, they get to keep them. And I think in no cases would the country be asked to pay for the city. The whole idea of this is countries that are having trouble getting foreign investment. They want companies to come in and build factories and make jobs. And in some cases, I think the city would share revenue with the country, but never the other way around.
So there's a lot that's negotiable. So what would be the set of laws that you would incorporate? Are you borrowing from the British system, the U.S. system? Where do you bring, what set of laws do you bring to these countries within countries?
Yeah, so, first off, we kind of, as a venture fund, we're willing to get pitched whatever set of laws. You just have to convince us that it'll be a great place to live and make jobs. I think that, my dream is to someday find better laws than exist today. But I think what we need to do right now is just to copy the existing best practices. So I think of it like a tech stack. If you want to make a great web product, you're going to use existing languages. You're going to use your MySQL, Apache, Linux stack. And so I think British common law is kind of it. And what some of our researchers are doing right now is going around to different countries, looking at their laws and trying to find who has the best contract law, who has the best housing codes, who has the best mortgage law, and then take those, copy them, make them match each other because they were written for different countries, and simplify them and actually make the world's first open source legal system, which is on GitHub right now.
So you did it again. Every time I think you're going to say something I'm going to disagree with, you say exactly the word I was waiting for. I was waiting for you to say the word simplification, because if you hadn't said that, I would have lost all confidence. Because that's 80% of the problem is that the laws are too complicated, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So I love that. All right. Tell the people who some of your famous venture funding backers are for this so they can get an idea how serious this is.
Sure. So our anchor investor is Peter Thiel, who is the first investor in Facebook. Other investors include Mark Andreessen, who invented the web browser and runs Andreessen Horowitz, Naval Ravikant, who's been on with you, who founded AngelList, Balaji Srinivasan, who was CTO at Coinbase, Roger Ver, Bitcoin Cash, a lot of great Silicon Valley people.
Yeah, for those of you who are listening to this who may not be familiar with all the names just listed, those are the smartest people in Silicon Valley. That's it. That basically just named the smartest people in Silicon Valley and are all on the same project. So that's telling you a lot. Now, for those of you who recognize the names as soon as he mentioned them, you probably just sort of fell out of your chair because it's hard to get that group of cats all in the same project. That's pretty remarkable. So congratulations on that. Is there any reason that you wouldn't do this in the United States?
Yeah, so they're actually, this year, for the first time, I saw a plausible project in the US. There have been some federal court cases in the last few years that have strengthened Native American sovereignty. So, for example, you can't enforce intellectual property laws on Native American reservations. You can't enforce Trump trade tariffs on reservations. So there's one that I've seen that's looking for a team of people to try a charter city in the U.S. But mostly the idea of these is to copy best practice laws and hire honest judges for places that need that. And so the better run a country is, the less interested it's going to be. And in the U.S. especially, there's a very strong federal government, and it's very hard to get local independence. With congressional support, you can actually do significant exemptions from federal law with what's called an interstate compact, but you have to have a majority in Congress. So it's not very fertile, but I'd love to see someone do something with Native American land.
Well, now, are you familiar with the vast amounts of land that's available basically for free in some of the rundown inner cities, typically called the blighted territories? Bill Pulte's been involved in clearing those out. And I know, for example, Jack Dorsey funded one of those with Bill Pulte to clear up in St. Louis. So there are these vast tracts within the inner cities where you could also build a walled city with its own security and its own systems and try to make something work within the city. Is it the American laws? If the American laws aren't that broken, wouldn't that be an easy place to start? Because you've already got laws that people kind of agree with. They just need the other stuff, the security, the keeping the good elements in and the bad elements out.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. And I mean, some Silicon Valley groups like Y Combinator and Google have looked into doing a city and what you could get there. And they both ultimately gave up. I think as far as Pronomos, what we're interested in is zones that have kind of different and simplified laws from the rest of the country, and where the country really wants us to come in. And I'm not sure that's true in the U.S., but I would say this is part of a broader movement to kind of rewrite and reform cities.
So is anything you're doing directly or indirectly related to construction, or is it really just about the laws and the society?
Well, these cities are going to have to get built, but we're not trying to innovate. I mean, I'm really interested in kind of all of these city technology companies and what they're doing in China, where they can put up a skyscraper in a week. But we're just directly going to focus on kind of getting these zones created and on the legal part of it. But then, these projects are actually going to build. And, one thing I want to emphasize is that we as a venture capital company, it's not like we have one legal system or one government that we are going to impose. This is about a bunch of different groups around the world doing startup cities that each have different laws. And where the only people who go into the city are the people who want to be there. So that's what's cool about this, is it's not imposed on anyone ever.
So as a venture fund, then the model is that anybody in some other country can put together a proposal and say, I want to bring this set of laws into this area, and I want to work with you, with my government, to get them to approve it all. Is that the basic model?
Yeah, and it's really important that they have strong connections to the country and that the government be interested in order for the government to pass laws and just for the project to be welcome. I think, this can so easily be something bad if it's imposed from the outside. And so it's critical that the country be saying, hey, we want one of these cities.
Who are you finding is calling for this the most? Because it seems to be a perfect fit with our immigration and homeland security. If you could, use these to pump up the viability of the Central American areas, we'd have less illegal immigration. Do you find interest from people like that? Who's showing you the most interest?
I would say that I have had some discussions with U.S. security officials, and they love the idea. The idea of countries close to us having more prosperous cities that are better run. I mean, that just benefits America. In general, I'd say it's kind of smaller smaller nations who are worried about economic development, or in some cases, climate change. So in my work with seasteading, which was the idea of building on the ocean, which I might have seen somewhere in one of your comic strips, we worked with French Polynesia, and there they were worried about climate change mitigation and how to protect their drowning islands. So there's a variety of interests, but mostly it's smaller countries who want to get jobs.
Do you have any good connections in the U.S. government that would be useful to you?
I have some, but it's a big government, and I could always use more.
Who would be your ideal person you'd want to get their ear in the government?
Well, there's a new U.S. development bank that's being merged out of a couple of the existing international investment systems. That would be great. And of course, it would be nice to get a tweet from Trump.
Yeah, usually that would take at least a senator or something to get on board. But so if you've got a target senator, maybe we can hook you up.
Sounds good.
All right. And where can people go to find out more about this?
Check out our website, which is Pronomos, Pronomos. It means good law in Greek, .vc. Or check out our Twitter at PronomosVC, or my Twitter is at Patrissimo.
And you can look at my Twitter feed, and you'll see I tweeted an article out just this morning, so you can follow up in there. So thank you so much. And make sure I'm saying this right. Patri?
Patri.
Patri. You know I'll never be able to say that correctly. I'm going to have to Americanize that a little bit. But thank you so much. You know, everything about this idea I like. Literally everything about it. I don't say that about most ideas, but I don't see a single thing wrong with this if you can pull it off. And it looks like you've got a good head start with lots of good backers. So we'll be watching this carefully, and check back in with me if you have any exciting updates. If you get a city that bites, I'm all over that. I want to hear more about that. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks so much for joining, and I'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye. All right. That was quite interesting. I hope you liked that as much as I did.